OnEducation is sponsored by Participate, a community learning platform where the world learns together. Later in the episode, we'll hear about one of Participate's partners, The Sandbox, and how you can get involved in its free community learning opportunities and live streams.
You have a different trust in your government, though.
We have a significantly larger amount of trust in our government. Welcome to OnEducation, part of the On Podcast Media Network. My name is Mike Washburn.
And I'm Glen Irvin. Friends, we have an awesome pod for you today. We will debate whether teacher vaccinations should be part of the terms of employment, how one prominent political candidate believes that one teacher could teach 300 to 400 students at one time online. And our guest this week is professor and author Jordan Shapiro.
So this is like one of the best weeks of the year for video games. And so considering we are obligated by contract to talk about video games in the first segment of this podcast,
video game news.
E3 is the world's largest video game conference. I've probably mentioned it before. I've been to E3 before. I used to do a lot of freelance writing for MMO websites. And covered MMOs and got sent to E3 to cover MMOs for a video game website. It's like one of the top 5 coolest experiences of my entire life.
Wow.
So E3 is like nothing you've ever seen before. And so, you know, there's a lot of cool stuff. There's always a lot of cool stuff. I thought it was neat, and I wasn't surprised to see that they announced an expansion to Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but also announced that a Discovery Tour version of Assassin's Creed Valhalla is coming out. I mean, that doesn't feel like a surprise. We had the producer of Assassin's Creed Discovery Tour on the show, like probably about a year and a half ago. And he said that for the second one, they were developing Discovery Tour alongside of the mainline game. So, of course, they were developing a Discovery Tour at the same time. So that's really great. So that means we're gonna get a AAA quality video game teaching students about Vikings and Norse mythology and Norse culture. That sounds pretty damn rad to me. So yeah. I'm excited about that.
I wonder how many, what would be interesting to know is how many school districts are using that. There's not a lot of chatter on social media about it. And I think there should be more. You always hear about some typical kind of different things as far as game-based learning, Minecraft and a few other things, but really, this is a super immersive worlds that are just like you just said, connected to the authentic video game. So they're not making some kind of little patch something on the side. This is the actual video game, and then turned so that it could just have an educational tour type of format, which is awesome. Yeah. So I hope that they can actually get their product out to more people out there, more teachers and their students that are interested.
Someone needs to develop an education enterprise-centric platform for distributing like AAA games. Like it'll need to be like Steam or the Epic Game Store or the EA Origin. One of those, like the big guys, need to develop a storefront for education, and get it curated by people who know what games,
what it is,
hell, I'll do it. But there are a lot of we know. I mean, I could probably name on my hands, the people that would be perfect for a job like this. Being a curator of games at a real storefront, someone like Paul Darvazi or Zach Hartzman or Steve Isaacs or even myself or you, or there's tons of people that we know. Matt Farber could do this for sure. There's a few people we know that would really do a really good job at this. They just need to invest a little time and energy into it, and then offer grants or something on money so that it can be distributed across multiple districts or multiple schools in a district, or licenses or something like that. It needs to happen.
Yeah, some kind of ease of entry, because you're right. Otherwise, it just feels really disconnected. Someone that could just bring it all together into one place. It's similar to our former sponsor. I think that's the kind of idea that they had as far as bringing a bunch of different types of games together into one platform where you could just purchase one subscription and have access to all of them. I just wonder about, sometimes about those corporate, entities, whether they're just even interested at all. There's probably not that much money in it.
There's no money in it.
There's no money.
There's no money in
education.
So they have to do it out of the goodness of their hearts for sure. So 100%. it's a bit of a stretch. There's not many of those big AAA organizations that are invested in education. Epic Games is probably the one that is the most invested in education right now, other than if Microsoft did it, for example, themselves. So a bunch of other things came out. I linked this trailer on my Twitter, but we're going to put it in the show notes. You have got to watch this trailer. So first off, it is the most self-aware trailer for the video game industry that it's the best trailer I've ever seen for a game. It is absolutely hysterical. I'm going to link it in the show notes. The Outer Worlds is an awesome game. If you've never played it, it's almost hot takey, and you'll know it's serious because it's coming from a guy. I love Fallout. Yeah. Outer Worlds does Fallout almost better than Fallout. It is an almost better version of Fallout. It is such a good game. And so Outer Worlds 2 will be awesome, I'm sure. But the trailer is absolutely hysterical and
very
worth a
cheeky.
watch. Oh, it's very, very good. And the other cool news, and I went through and scrolled through about 80 articles to find some of the things I was most interested in. The Nintendo Direct is tomorrow, so we've missed that. We won't be able to talk about what Nintendo's going to announce because the Nintendo press conference is tomorrow. But Bethesda, who is, by most accounts, probably the most critically acclaimed game studio there is. Yes. Their intellectual property is, Fallout and Elder Scrolls. Right? Basically those two games, and then, some other side stuff. Dishonored. They made Dishonored as well. But their brand new, epic IP is called Starfield, and it launches on November 11th, 2022. So that's my birthday. Bethesda does a really good job of launching games on my birthday.
Wow.
They've done
there must be something special on that day.
It's me. It's because of me. They launched Skyrim, for example, came out on 11/11/11. November 11th, 20.
And it's still so good. Still one of the best games. We were talking about it on Twitter the other night. I've played Skyrim recently, and it's installed on my computer right now, and I'm still playing it. 10 years. It's been 10 years almost. And it's still good. So, but Starfield. So we'll see what it's like. They called it an Obi-Wan Kenobi simulator. So interesting.
Who knows? Yeah, that might get some people.
Yeah, I saw the preview and I was like, it was underwhelming.
Yeah. Almost everything they've done related to it has been pretty underwhelming. They haven't really shared any gameplay really at all.
Yeah.
But that's pretty typical Bethesda. So, I mean, what you're getting when they announce a new Fallout game, you know what you're getting. Yeah. Right? You're getting something post-apocalyptic at the very least. and there's definitely a style, like it's that 50s style, but post-apocalyptic. You know what you're getting with Elder Scrolls.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting high fantasy, right? Lots of mountains and trees and water and, lush plains and all of this epic stuff. Now we're getting space, I guess.
Yeah.
And we'll
space
see
exploration, baby.
we'll see what happens. But there's your E3 update. If you weren't getting any, I don't know how many educators actually like our video game coverage, but here you're getting it anyways. So, it's our 10 minutes of indulgence in a crazy world of education. So we don't agree on this at all, I don't think, and this is interesting. So we put a poll out last week. So asking, should all teachers be vaccinated unless they have a well-documented medical condition preventing them from receiving any sort of vaccine? Should this be in future terms of employment? And 63.2% of people said yes. And 36.8% said no. So a fairly clear majority said that all teachers should be vaccinated, and that all teachers should have a requirement to be vaccinated. And this is my opinion as well. I agree with that. I'm on that side, and you're not.
Nope. It's too easy to say yes, actually. And I think that's the reason why on a Twitter poll, people would say yes until you really thought through what the implications of saying that, especially the part of, now, should all teachers be vaccinated? Yes, I agree with you. Yes, they should be. Should it be part of the future terms of employment is a very... you are starting to tread upon some things that you don't want to go ahead and be treading onto if you're an educator. So you're agreeing to things as an educator that can later then also be manipulated in terms of employment, as far as to make you do other things. And as a former person that was negotiating contracts, this is like red flag central. Whenever it seems like something that should be fairly obvious, as far as something that's there's a strong feeling, a strong passion towards it, and I agree about that. As far as we should all be vaccinated, but forcing people, not forcing them, but just saying, hey, if you're going to do this, then you have to do this other thing. Though it seems like the right thing to do, it's too easy of a next step then for something else, then for it to become basically the next level. You already agreed to this, so now we have set precedent, and then now the precedent is set for this other thing. And that happens a lot in negotiation, especially with union negotiations. It's all about precedent setting. So you want to things like this immediately bring out red flags in me. That's what I thought about when I looked at it right away. I was like, yes, yeah, sure, I agree with that. But then I saw the part of the future terms of employment, and as a person that I've been there at the table, and I've been at things with our union, as far as our state union and negotiation, let's call it strategies, and you don't want to agree to things like this. Plus, this also makes me fear, because we're talking usually about public employees. If this is a private school, this is something completely different. So if you guys are working at a private school, I hate to tell you this, but you're screwed. You are working for an institution that is a private institution that can decide all of their rules. They get to decide all the rules as long as they're playing by the government's overall rules. But when you're talking about a public institution, it's a different animal. So in this case, I'm talking about public institutions. In some schools, some districts, it could actually end up being the fact. But in the United States, Mike, I just don't even see this even happening. I mean, there was a post about. I'm talking about how many people even agree to this? You know what I mean? As far as they're on our, the left wing side, let's just call it, even on the leftish side, or just even the middle, and say that we should all be vaccinated. I think it was the state of Vermont got 80% of their people, of their citizens vaccinated. And that's the highest so far as in the United States. It just shows you how reluctant a huge majority of our population is to doing things. So I don't think it would happen anyway. But just hypothetically, it's a scary thing to agree to these types of things. And that's the reason, that's the angle that I'm coming at it from. Not that I don't agree. And if it did happen, I think it would be for the right reasons. So if it did end up happening in a state, wherever it might be, and they said, this is part of our, being a teacher, you have to do X. I think we're on the other side of this now too, in the United States. I was out shopping today with my wife. You would have never known that there was COVID ever. Like, I didn't see it. It's like it never happened. So we're like so far down already, so quickly down the road of like forgetting about it, that this kind of stuff, it would never fly. So anyway, that's my big giant long take of the reason why I said no to this.
Do you agree with requiring students to be vaccinated to attend public school?
Yeah. Again, in the United States, you have do I agree that you should be? Yes.
No, but it's a requirement in most states.
You can opt out. Opt out.
Right. Okay. So the opting out
without a doctor's reason. You can opt out. I'm telling you, there's
in
the United States
for religious reasons or whatever too.
You can go in and sign a piece of paper, literally. You say, nope, I'm not going to do that. Give me the piece of paper. And parents that know this, whatever, this fact, can go in there and just request it. It's signed. They get to opt out. And there's nothing you can really do about it. Like you just said, it's freedom of religion or there's a list of all of these other things.
But we can agree that that's a bad thing, right?
We can agree that it's not a good, safe thing. You're right. Right. The government, yes, I agree with you. Yes, but yeah. But again, these kids are coming to a public institution to go ahead and be part of this thing, of this school, and I don't know if the kids and the teachers, as far as the terms of employment, are in the same. We're talking the same thing. I mean, you may think that is the same thing.
We are only in the sense that we require certain amounts of our population to be vaccinated, but aren't going to require other parts. And we do this to protect kids from themselves. Yet, we clearly know that there are adults especially I shouldn't say. I'm gonna rephrase it because I was about to get myself into trouble. We know for sure that there are adults that are so dumb that they need laws in order to protect themselves from themselves.
Yes, but we still have the opposite argument, which these are two clashing forces. It's called government control over what you get to decide to go ahead and do, especially related to your health. And I think I said that several times in this thread. And the safety of everybody. So you have these two clashing forces. When you allow the government to go ahead and take control and decide your things for you, depending upon who are the people, it wasn't even that long ago, Mike. Again, we just quickly forget the people that were in charge there and the people that Donald Trump put into power to make decisions on our behalf could quickly decide a million different things on our behalf. If we had given up those rights. And that's the reason why those things are there, kind of to be able to go ahead and play that safeguard so that a person that is way out there and somehow magically, weirdly, strangely gets elected to be the president can't abuse those powers to be able to make some kind of mass crazy decision. It is a good idea. I agree with you. I agree people should be vaccinated. The kids too, and everybody should be doing this. But when we give up all our choices and we give them up to the government and let them make the choices for us, that could end up in the wrong side. And that's really, I mean, that's kind of the basis of a lot of the things that happen in the United States. It's kind of like, how much power do we give the federal and the state governments, the local governments, versus how much freedom do we have ourselves? Now, some people use that and abuse that, that thing as far as the personal freedoms to some crazy extents, gun laws and so on and so forth, to be able to do things that are just stupid. Yes. But we need those things there in order to kind of play that back and forth type thing. So that's, I trust me, I don't find it, I'm not finding it finding pleasure in debating on that side of the thing. It's just that I have been in some negotiations where it felt like, oh yeah, we should do X, whatever it was. And it was like, no, we shouldn't, because that sets the precedent for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And eventually you've given up everything. And you were like, how the hell did we do this? And in this case, we're talking about your decisions to make your own health decisions. So that's the reason why I'm saying it's very connected to pro-life, pro-choice types of things. I mean, people are going to go like, yeah, vaccination. We're talking about health things. So whenever you talk about health and you allow the government to make those decisions for you, bad things can happen. I think that's what I'm saying. Maybe I'm wrong, and obviously some other people believe that I'm wrong because it's 63% say.
Yeah, I definitely. And we were talking in the OnEducation Twitter about how this might be a cultural thing too. Especially like I asked my wife, for example, and she didn't even like. I barely stopped talking before she said yes. She didn't even hesitate. And I didn't hesitate to think yes either.
Sure.
And I think you would, if you talk to a lot of Canadians, they would also say yes.
You have a different trust in your government, though.
We have a significantly larger amount of trust in our government. 100%.
I would say, yes.
Totally. We know. We also know, and this is, health in the United States is very individualistic because you don't have universal health care. So everyone's health is different, and everyone's, it's a financial thing. It's something that dominates your decision making in a lot of ways in your life.
Yes.
Where I don't think about my health care at all.
No.
You know what I mean? Not even a single bit. If I'm sick, I go to the damn doctor, and I don't think about anything. If I have to go to the hospital, I go to the hospital. I don't even think about it. I just go. I don't have to decide, you guys have to even decide which hospital you're allowed to go to in some cases, which is insanity to me. And so, I've seen and I live the effects of what, a mass healthcare institution can do for the health of the populace, right? Sure. Canada is a very healthy country, generally speaking. I think we have, some of the similar issues with like obesity and stuff like that. But generally speaking, when we have problems, we get things taken care of, without hesitancy. Sure. And so,
no, I would 100% agree.
I definitely think that there's a cultural issue.
Yeah, I mean, if we had the same type of system, I don't even think this would even be a discussion. But then we wouldn't be the United States.
Well,
you know what I mean? I'll tell you that right now. It wouldn't be this country,
right? Well,
because we are not at all. We're actually. I felt that we were creeping towards the idea of having some sort of nationalized healthcare probably 16 years ago.
Right.
I would say maybe 12 to 16 years ago. I felt like this could actually happen. Right now, I think we're further from that than we were 16 years ago. Way further. Like, in other words, I actually don't see it happening when I'm alive. So I'm thinking I'm going to be alive maybe another 50 years. I'm hoping 40, 50 years. It will not happen in the 40. That's how different we are than and it 100% makes sense. There's ways to do it where everybody could benefit, where you're not going to destroy everybody. You're not going to do whatever it might be, but we're further away than when we were, where I thought, oh, we could be headed in that direction. You have Bernie, you got this, we got some ideas, ways to be able to happen. Obamacare, kind of like a preview. Hey, we could do this, and yeah, it's not going to. It's not.
Right.
I don't see it happening, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope I am 100% wrong, but.
Me too.
That's how far away we are from that, man. Sucks.
There you go. So, so Eric Adams is running for New York City mayor, and he's having a bad week. Let's just say he's having a bad week. Actually, to compound what we're going to talk about, I just watched last week tonight with John Oliver. It's shown on Sunday. My wife and I usually watch it on Monday, so we watched it a couple hours ago here, and he was on there having a bad night too. But talk about someone basically handing their main competitor, like Andrew Yang is going to be the mayor of New York City because this guy just imploded this week. And it's all about education.
Yeah, so important.
Eric Adams says with new technology, you don't need school children to be in a school building with a number of teachers. It's just the opposite. You could have one teacher teaching 300 to 400 students.
Dang, that's a terrible statement.
I've taught 400 students before. I almost had a friggin' mental breakdown. And it's not sustainable. It was just awful. And it gets worse. He tweeted, or he said that kids only need to get 6 to 7 hours of sleep per night. That's medically just totally not true. And have only one teacher teaching 300 to 400 kids. So, and then he goes and takes his kids to school in New Jersey. Yeah. What many number of ways do you want to talk about how wrong this stuff is?
I just think that things like this, though, this obviously horrible take, and a belief in a specific way that things could be done is actually more prominent in the public outside of the educational sphere. Let's take a step outside of Twitter, outside of the people, just one of my neighbors. If you propose ideas, something like this, and it's a prominent political figure, and you say, hey, and because of this, we're going to save taxpayers X amount of money, right? Because that's usually what comes along with this. Education is super expensive, and we've said that before. It should be expensive, but it's super expensive to the point that certain people are paying X amount of dollars in their taxes, and they know it's going directly into this system. If you knew you were going to have that amount reduced, because we really didn't need to do that. We could just have these 300-400 kids and this one person to be able to go ahead and teach them, and it still would be the same. Dang, you can really get some people on board with that. Yeah, and that's horrible. It's like, talk about terrible takes. There's some good takes as far as some back and forth conversation that can be had in education. We have them on the show, some things, some decisions that could go either way. And there's some good points on both sides. This is just stupid. This is like and it's not only on the fringes, but it helps to encourage that kind of super fringe thinking that our job can be done at, one person can manage 400 kids. And that is going to be totally fine. We're going to get the same results. Like, no, so stupid, but yet promoting these ideas. And it sucks because that will stick in some people's minds. They will remember that. They will say, we should just cut down the things, take X amount of dollars out of education, and let's make sure we do this. So it's so terrible, but it doesn't surprise me.
I was wondering if he was a Democrat. I actually went and looked up.
Yeah, what is it?
So because it's actually the Democratic primary for the mayor's election.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Right?
Well, he's a Democrat.
Yeah, he's a Democrat. Yes. Oddly, he's a Democrat. Because there will be a mayor's election where there will be a Republican versus a Democrat, I think.
Yeah.
But no Republican is going to win the New York City mayor's election. So whoever wins this is going to be the mayor. And it's not going to be this dude. Talk about imploding your chances to be mayor in 1 week. But he basically, he pissed off, the unions and probably pissed off a bunch of parents at the same time.
Absolutely. Yes.
So good work, buddy.
Yeah.
So, we'll see. When we come back, we're going to talk to our good friend, Jordan Shapiro. So stay with us.
We are building this virtual community of educators who share an interest in game design and teaching new skills. We will use this space to connect, collaborate, and innovate with the Sandbox.
That's Sebastian Bourget. He's the co-founder and chief operating officer at the Sandbox.
This community is here to provide guidance, support, feedback, and suggestions on how to best use the Sandbox within the context of teaching and learning how to make video games. It allows also to connect experts and educators, bringing together existing creators and members of the Sandbox game platform community with professional educators.
The Sandbox community has grown into a vibrant space of 100+ educators. How can you get involved? More to come later in the episode.
All right, welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Our guest is a father of 2 and stepfather of 2 more. He teaches in Temple University's Intellectual Heritage Program and is a senior fellow for the Joan Ganz Cooney Center at Sesame Workshop. He's also a non-resident fellow in the Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution. His previous book, The New Childhood, received critical acclaim, including from us, and has been published in 11 languages. This is his 3rd time joining us on the podcast. Welcome, Jordan Shapiro.
It's great to be here for the 3rd time.
Exciting. So, Jordan, draw a line for us from, video games and games in education expert to advisor on parenting in a digital world to shattering norms of fatherhood and parenting identity. Have there been moments, that brought you to these kind of big, fairly large shifts in your life and career? Or do you kind of more see it as like a natural progression of things?
I think the transition to father figure was a pretty natural progression. I mean, so much about that I wrote about in The New Childhood was about the way that changes in the world were changing the way we think about ourselves and changing the way we think about identity and the need to reimagine the ways that we think about identity so that we don't react with hate and we don't react with violence and we don't react with anger. And it was about teaching kids how to manage a world where so many of the familiar boundaries were dissolving. And so in that way, I think it was a natural shift. And in many ways, father figure's about the same things, just without the technology. It's about a lot of the large cultural shifts that are happening and how we as dads, but I think it's applicable to anyone who deals with children, need to really think about how we guide our children or the children we care for in ways that help them deal with this moment in time. And then, of course, how we have to change the way we think about ourselves so that we ourselves can manage this moment in time. Because we often think it's hard for kids, but it's hard for grownups too. Yeah,
for sure. And so I think a lot of skeptics and a lot of folks on the right, I was thinking, the Jordan Peterson fans out there would look at this book and just ask why. I feel like I can see it now. Why do I need to be a feminist? Isn't this just another book meant to make my boys soft? I'm using air quotes for these words. He's trying to make us hate Homer Simpson. And, while I suspect that's not the target market for this book, I would expect you, though, to maybe have some sort of response for why you think this is an important book right now, and why you thought that this was a problem in need of a solution.
Yeah. In some ways, I wish that were the target audience, because I wish that those people would read it. And in some ways, I did write it when I decided to finally sit down and write this book. Part of it was because I had read books like the Jordan Peterson book, and read books like so many of the current crop of masculinity books. And what I found when I read them is that most of these books actually started in a really positive way, right? Where they described what was hard about being identifying as a man in this current moment in time, why cultural changes were making men feel destabilized and feel like the ground was falling out from underneath them. And I thought that some of those books did a really good job of describing that crisis point. The problem is that their solution to that crisis point was, we have to go back to 1950s style stoic male domination, and all these really toxic, what they call toxic masculinity, all those ideas. And so I wanted to say, hey, it makes perfect sense to me that this moment in time would feel destabilizing. And, when we've all learned to, men have learned to identify through a lens of patriarchal masculinity. And when you see that crumbling around you, how do you make sense of yourself? And I wanted to give an image, because I realized there wasn't an image for how to do that in a way that wasn't in what I consider backwards thinking. I shouldn't even say what I consider backwards thinking, because it really is a kind of let's look to the past, and it's this idea that the current changes are destroying something, but we know they're helping a lot of things also. So you don't look back, because then you have to throw out all the good stuff. Instead, you have to reinvent so that you can maintain all the good stuff and deal with the real crises and the real dilemmas. And so much of this book is about what I think men really do want, all men. I mean, I don't really think it's a partisan issue. I mean, I think if you ask most men, how do you feel about gender equality? They're going to say, I'm all for it. The problem is that we don't have images about how to do that, and we don't have models of it. And so I wanted to offer a model. But what's strange is that in order to do that, you have to do it in a way where you're not sort of offering a dominating viewpoint of what things are, because then you're part of that old paradigm. So the challenge of the book was to go, hey, how do I offer a sort of structural model for how people can arrive at their own decision? There's nothing, I mean, you both know there's nothing in this book that says this is how you should be. There's a lot in this book that says this is how you can look at who you are in order to come up with a better idea for yourself of who you want to be.
I'm sure there's been a lot of great responses to the book. I tweeted, as I was reading it, a couple days ago, that I'm loving it. I think it's phenomenal. But I suspect the bad responses might be a little more informative in terms of, where society is on these topics. So let's talk about, you got in, we were talking off air about it, and it might be a little more benign than I originally thought, but, someone burning your book and sending you a video of that, for example, what do responses, and you've clearly gotten, worse than that. What do responses like that, say to you?
Well,
What? Because you say it's not a partisan thing, but definitely responses to this book can be fairly divided along partisan lines, I imagine. So I'm totally interested in, you just put the word feminist in anything and the whole world comes crashing down, right? So what is this telling you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting really, as you said, divided responses, polarized responses. On the one hand, I'm getting a ton of positive feedback from people going, "Oh my goodness, this is a book that I didn't even realize was necessary, yeah. but it's so obviously needed right now, and it's so and it's so helpful in what it does. But then I'm also getting the angry responses. I mean, some of them are stupid. Some of them are just sort of, the obvious "you're an idiot" kind of things. As you said, why do you want to ruin manhood? Why do you hate men? Nonsense like that. But I think the larger thing, the thing I'd rather focus on, actually, because I think it's useful for people to understand, and it's something that I realized in all of my research for this book, is that the way that men within the model of patriarchal masculinity have been taught to insult or to try to assert dominance over other men is to feminize them, and so that gets mixed with all these images of subjugation, whether that's, hey, you're a girl, hey, you're a sissy, hey, but then there's also the homophobia and the transphobia and the racism that gets mixed in with that. It's almost like anything that doesn't equal white male masculine privilege has to we just sort of cut you down a notch by saying, you're by using these slurs, and almost always these slurs include some level of misogyny, by which I mean some level of feminizing the person that's on the other end of it, So we do this, we're three men talking about this. We've all been in locker rooms, I'm sure, in our lives, definitely in our childhood. So we can remember what middle school's like, where you get called all these names that sort of imply that you're somehow feminine, right? That imply that you're somehow not male enough. And I think it's important. The reason I'm focusing on that is because one of the reasons I wanted to call father figure, make the subtitle of the book "How to Be a Feminist Dad," is because I wanted to really emphasize how much that misogyny underlies so much of the homophobia, the transphobia, the racism, that it's all mixed in together in what some researchers call intersectionality.
When my oldest son was only 2 or 3 years old, he's now going to be in high school this next year, which I can't even believe. I clearly remember him choosing these amazing pink sunglasses. They had rhinestones on them and they were huge. And that was his favorite pair of sunglasses, and he wore them everywhere, including even to preschool a few years later. I mean, this was like he was 2 or 3, and then, he was probably 4 when he was doing that. And I remember thinking when he picked those, he chose those, I'm like, hey, good for you. I was like, good for you. My wife and I were talking, like, he had any idea what the societal norms were for colors, right? And it had my wife and I thinking today, and we were talking about it, about societal pressures to label our kids even before they're born. You choose their colors of their clothes, of their rooms, blues and pinks, like that's a specific things. And you're either this category or this category. And even obviously corporate has bought into that thing and pushed those images. And I think it's possibly moving and shifting, but it's still there. It's definitely still there. Even choosing the toys that they play with. I know you had some different references as far as within the book about these types of things too. Or the activities that we choose for them to participate in. So I don't know if you have an answer or solution to this, but maybe talk or expand more on this of what are your thoughts on the societal pressures and what do we do to break out of these ridiculous norms that we basically continue to perpetuate each time we decide that we're going to participate in this game that continues on and on. We pass that on obviously to our kids too.
Yeah, and
I'm not sure if you have an answer.
well, and it's especially hard. It's especially hard for parents, I think, because even when we recognize that some of those, like the blue-pink dichotomy, are absurd, we also fear for what happens when those societal pressures hit our kids, the potential bullying, the things like that, and it puts us in a hard place to deal with it. Yeah, I mean, and also they're absurd. I mean, they don't even make any sense, right? If you look at the history of pink, right, it's only been considered a feminine color for I don't know exactly the amount of time, but it wasn't that before the 20th century, right? Like that happened at some point, and it became a kind of marketing thing, and now we're sort of stuck in this model. I've always talked to my kids about it from the time they were very little. I certainly would have let them go to school in whatever they wanted to go in school with, and in many cases they did. But then, as parents, we also see those days when they come home where they've sort of been like, I don't want to push against the social pressures anymore, and of course we can't force them to do it as much as I wish I could. And one of the things I talk about in Father Figure is that often a lot of parents think talking about it or calling it out is not the right thing to do as a parent. I tell a story about being in Target in the book, and I'm talking to my kids about why is there a different aisle for Legos for girls and Legos for boys? Like, this doesn't really make any sense to me. It makes sense. I guess it makes sense from a marketing standpoint. If your goal is just sell more Lego, then I can see why you might do that. But from a standpoint of gender, it doesn't make sense. And I remember standing in Target asking my kids about it, and some stranger coming up to me and going, why are you doing that? Why don't you just let them be? Like, why are you trying to kill their fun? Like, why aren't boys allowed to like what they want? And it was the implication that I was somehow like ruining their innocence by pointing out the fact that there was a social injustice being perpetuated here. And I remember thinking to myself at this moment, like, what is ruining innocence more? Continuing to perpetuate the injustice that asks them to conform to things that may not feel right to them, or telling them that they don't have to? To me, I think we actually preserve innocence by calling these things out. And I think that's the important thing for parents to realize. But again, I say that with a full recognition, because I see it in my own kids, the difficulty of having to deal with all the pressures of social status in a school atmosphere.
I couldn't help but think while I was reading, just, and Glen has touched on it, and so I'm glad that we're here talking about constructs. And there's, this whole, it's almost a story of the things that we've constructed, that now need to be broken down. And you reference, and this is where I got thinking, and I'm going to read more about it, but the legacy of people like Reagan, talking about what a strong family is, and what the hell does that even mean? And we know what he thought it meant, and that's what the construct is, right? But all of these things are changing, at breakneck speed. Your book is a huge reminder of all of those changes, and so maybe expand more on the constructs and the need for them to be broken down.
The truth is, we have all these ideas. I think we all know so many of them. We've all been through. Anyone who's, I'm 43 years old, so if you're close to my age, you've probably been through that like cycle of your 20s and 30s where you go, oh crap, I've been trying to conform with all the pressures that I thought mattered, and they didn't make me happy. And you sort of have to find what you really want for yourself, and that's sort of a normal thing at this point that I think a lot of people go through. We call it sometimes midlife crisis, when things like that. There's a whole industry, right, of self-help and yoga and all these things to try sort of help you figure out how to let go of the societal pressures that may have tricked you into trying to be something that doesn't fit well to you. And then, of course, we have a ton of them when they come to family, right? What does it mean to be a father, which is what I was really interested in Father Figure. What are all those social narratives about that we play into about what it means to be a good father, which don't necessarily resonate with the way we want to imagine ourselves or the way that we want to interact interact with our children or our spouses or our families or just our friends. But we don't have another model to do it. And again, back to what I was saying before, we've been shamed into it, and we've been shamed into it through a whole lot of that misogynistic insults and slurs. If you, again, that locker room talk, right? That we all experienced, where you can be the most innocent, gentle boy in the world, and you get into a locker room and they tell you to be tougher and stop being so girly and stop being all these things, and you learn to play along with that, and then that becomes this sort of goal as a father to live into this image of what you imagine to be sort of ideal masculine maturity. But none of us actually feel like we're achieving it most of the time, right? Most of the time we feel like we're failing, right? Because the rules of masculinity are set up in such a way that only one person's supposed to be the dominant authority, the so-called alpha, right? So everybody else feels like I'm not really doing it. So then we're filled with this sense of shame that then we turn into even more of the same as we shame anyone we can in order to build ourselves up. We saw this with Donald Trump for years, and where he even you could even see his insecurity, because anytime anyone dared insult him, he was like, "Oh my God, they're being so mean to me. Stop bullying." He was like the first one to be like, "Don't bully me," and then he just turned around and bullied anyone with less power than him. And that's a model of what we all do as men on some level, often unconsciously, often inadvertently, but we're still doing it because we've been sort of socialized into this cycle of shame and missed aspirations, right? Right. That might not even have been aspirations we actually had, but there are aspirations we thought we should have had and couldn't necessarily meet. That sadness is fine. That there's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong is when that then manifests as anger, dominance, violence, of course, but even emotional violence and the things that we don't necessarily think of as violence that end up hurting a lot of people around us. That's where I have a line in the book where I say, men mansplain where they can, because in most of their lives they can't, right? So you're sitting around with your boss, and mostly you have to just shut up and let him be the alpha, right? Or her. And then you get home and you're like, well, here I'm allowed to be the boss. So you overdo it, and you're not listening to them, and then you're modeling this cycle of shame for your children, and they're just going to grow into the exact same thing. And so that's what I'm trying to say when I'm saying let's break those constructs. Are these sort of everyday participation in the constructs that ends up hurting ourselves and so many of the people around us.
Sure. And finally, if parents are like the front line of this kind of discussion with your kids and this breaking down of constructs and whatnot, I can't help but think that educators are like a line just behind that have a big, I think, role to play in this. And there's a lot of debate. Like, this is the same debate we've had on the past couple episodes. We've been talking a lot about the 1619 project and talking about, how race is taught in class and the, the pushback that you're getting that is happening in school districts all across America about teaching critical race theory. And I can't help but think that there's a lot of similarities with this type of topic at school as well. So how do you think educators can respond to some of these ideas? Where do you think teaching fits into how we move forward, teaching our kids, to rebuild new constructs or to, at the very least, tear down the constructs that exist?
Yeah. The teaching is definitely, there's a few things you said I want to comment on. One, I do think parents are the front line. I also think teachers are the front line, but in saying that, I also don't want to minimize the amount of structural and institutionalized sexism and racism that no matter how hard we change our minds, until we change policies and until we change the way we organize things, right? Like, I don't want to put it on individuals, because that's often becomes the way we avoid having to ever change anything, is by going, oh, well, if you just were to change your thinking and your attitude, then equality would happen. And it's not that simple.
Right.
But again, I'm writing a book to parents, and there's a lot in it about teaching. As you know, there's a lot in it about my experience in the classroom and why I do things in the classroom that are based on the same idea. At the core of this book are ideas from Paulo Freire, and the ideas of building critical consciousness, and this idea that the very way, if I were to use the classroom example, I guess I'll start with the classroom and then move it to the family. Freire talked about how the classroom itself was organized in such a way that there was an expert at the front whose job it was he's the guy who came up with the banking model of education, right? To deposit knowledge into the students. And his point there wasn't necessarily, we talk about that often in terms of the problem with Sage on the stage, but his point was more that normalizes a kind of oppressor consciousness. It normalizes for kids the idea that they're supposed to be subjugated, right? That there's a subjugate and a dominant, right? And that in their life, they're always going to either be the teacher or the student, right? We start to normalize this model of inequality. And so you need to structure the classroom in a way where that's not necessarily the case. Right now, that's really hard to do. And I again talk about this in Father Figure a lot, because on the one hand, we're all teachers. So we know, there is some level of classroom management that requires a level of authority and making sure you have control of what's happening. But you also have to make sure you're not controlling the minds and the experiences of the individuals in the classroom at the same time. Well, that extends to family in the same way, right? If we build a family where the model is there is a patriarch at the head of the table whose job it is to be in charge of everyone else, well, you're basically just conditioning everyone to think that is a natural, normal role. That's how things have to be, and that's not how things have to be. Where it is possible to build much more consensual communities of equality. And again, equality doesn't mean that there is not the person who's responsible for assigning the homework and grading the papers and managing the classroom. It just means that is a role in that classroom. It is not the person in charge of the classroom. I try so hard to say when I do talk about teaching, I try never to say my students or my classroom, because I don't like that sense of ownership. It's hard. Sometimes you have to say it, and words are just words. It's not like it's a great sin if I say it or something. But the idea is that I'm consciously always thinking about, am I building a model that is equal in the sense that everyone has the same amount of dignity and the same amount of ability to and the same amount of autonomy, both student and teacher, both father and child, both husband and wife, both partner and partner. I mean, we could go through all of them, but that's what we have to do. And by changing those structures, we start by changing them in our minds, then maybe we change them in our classrooms and in our families, and then hopefully that changes to changing the policies and the larger institutional structures. My hope is that if I raise a generation of my own children and the students that I teach, that they will not even be able to imagine the structural inequalities that currently exist. Like, they'll just be shocked by it and go, "This has to change tomorrow because it doesn't work."
So, Jordan, to continue the conversation, where can our audience connect with you online? Where can they go to learn more about being able to purchase Father Figure?
Well, you can purchase Father Figure pretty much anywhere you can purchase books, or you can go to my website, which is feministdadbook.com, feministdadbook.com. Remember in the old days, you had to listen to messages 4 times to get the number written down back when there were answering machines. So feministdadbook.com, or you can follow me on all of on every social media. I'm at Jordosh, Jordosh. That's true on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Anything that I even discovered today that's true on Reddit. So that's true everywhere.
Awesome. Jordan Shapiro, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The Sandbox is creating a learning ecosystem where educators can learn in weekly streams, bring ideas into their classrooms, collaborate with other educators, and become Sandbox ambassadors.
Our goal through the stream is to show the world how low the barrier can be to teaching and learning game making through our no-code and accessible platform. Anyone can do it. Passion and education. You can feel it in the streams as we explore and share ideas around game design implementation in your teaching practice.
Join the community to learn more at go.participate.com/sandbox. Thanks for listening to OnEducation. My name is Glen Irvin. My co-host is Mike Washburn. OnEducation is part of the On Podcast Media Network. You can listen to this show and many others by great educators like Monica Burns, Mike Matera, Tisha Richmond, and many more by visiting onpodcastmedia.com. Want to get in touch with us? Check out our website, oneducationpodcast.com. You can tweet us at oneducationpod. Mike is at Mr. Washburn on Twitter, and I can be found on Twitter at IrvSpanish. You can find us on Facebook by visiting facebook.com/oneducationpod. We're also on Instagram at oneducationpod. If you're enjoying the show and think others would too, we would be thrilled if you shared it with them. Please leave us a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. When you leave a rating, it gives our rankings a boost. This helps others discover the show. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Participate, for supporting us. Check out participate.com to learn more about them. Thanks as always for listening. Stay awesome and see you soon.